The war between the Heron and Raven nations is over. Braun, the king of the Ravens and the main enemy of Scion, has been bested in combat and disappeared. His superpowered benefactor Mai Shen teleported him from the field of battle before Ethan could finish him off. Is he actually dead? Well, we certainly hope so. But this is comics, so don't hold your breath. With Braun gone, though, many of the reasons for the war have gone with him. Ethan and Ashley are safe on their now claimed island, which has been opened up to the lesser races. All are welcome. But what does this mean for the Raven lands, which rely on their slave labor as a workforce? Or the Herons, who treat their lesser races better, but still as their main labor force? How will they react to Ethan's new cause, and home, and love? Is Ashley still wanted by the crown for the murder of her father? And having been handed this new sense of freedom, will the lesser races be content to let two humans rule them? Should humans rule them at all if they're actually equals? My name is Ben, and we're going to find out how far everyone will go. This is Comic Book Breakdown, episode 18.16 of Scion. Death to Tyrants. In a dark, mysterious room, we see a crossbow, a handful of arrows, and a thin, sleek dagger. A hairy, four-fingered hand gathers up these weapons carefully and moves out of frame. Issue 27 is brought to us by author Ron Mars, penciler Lee Moder, inker Roland Paris, and colorist Jason Keith. Moder is a big change from regular artist Jim Chung. He is much more rounded and soft in his presentation. He's still fairly bright, so Jason Keith's coloring matches the tone of Justin Ponser's pretty well. From a coloring perspective, this issue fits in with the rest of our series pretty decently. There are definitely less highlights, like right off the bat things look less shiny, but that honestly just makes them seem more realistic. Perhaps the only real complaint I have about Moder is that he feels particularly uncomfortable in the world of Avalon. His backgrounds don't really match his characters very well. They feel open and empty, almost as if the backgrounds were done separately and then more carefully rendered characters were dropped on top of them. They don't feel like they're part of the same image. This particular issue opens with Prince Kai and Princess Elena as they stroll along the harbor streets of the Tournament Isle. Kai is in a foul mood, still upset about Ethan choosing to help the lesser races instead of staying with his family. Elena tries to calm him down. This might not have been the kind of decision that they would have made, but Ethan is a man now. He is capable of making his own decisions, and he has always done what he thought was right. He's his own person, and they should respect that. Kai scoffs. His own person, huh? Then why did he take up residence in the Heron compound? Kai asks as they approach the building. The golden heron symbol of their house rests on the center of the door. Kai bangs his fists in the door, calling for Ethan. It's high time that they talked about... When the door opens, it isn't Ethan who answers. It's Ashley. A light sheen of sweat covers her skin, and her small top is barely secured over her chest. A towel is draped around her neck. She has clearly been training or working out in some way. She apologizes. Ethan isn't here right now. Kai trips over his own tongue a little bit, unprepared for Ashley to be there and unprepared for her to look so revealing. Elena deftly steps in, though. They had hoped to see Ethan before they left in order to say goodbye. Ashley informs them that he's down at the shore, seeing the swimmers off. Elena thanks her and then goes to leave, but Ashley quickly grabs her hand. The last time that they saw each other, Ashley promised to take care of Ethan, and she has. Despite the differences between her and Ethan's families thanks to their birth, she shares their concern for him. Elena says that she knows that, and she knows that Ethan feels Kai suddenly cuts her off. They need to go. Reluctantly, Elena agrees. As they walk away, Elena says that she thinks Ethan will be happy here, with Ashley. As she watches them leave, Ashley had hoped that they could get to know each other better. Maybe next time. This is an interesting moment to me. The Kai and Elena stuff is pretty standard, although I won't lie, I'm annoyed at Kai still being upset again. He was happy and relieved to see Ethan last issue when he thought that he might be dead after the fight with Braun. What happened to that Kai? Where did he go? Just appreciate that Ethan is alive and doing what he thinks is right and isn't hurting you or the family. I get that your feelings are hurt, but you need to swallow your pride, Kai, and tell Ethan that you love him. The Ashley and Elena stuff, in particular, is what interests me. Since Ethan allied with the Underground, Ashley's been a bit of a background character. The only thing that she's really done on her own was start smooching Ethan, honestly, but here she reaches out to Elena. She even says that she wanted to get to know her, so it seems that Ashley wants to be friends with her. And why not? Ashley has been shown to be a bit of an outsider within her own family, growing up with older brothers, at least one of whom is a confirmed jerk. She probably wanted some kind of female friend, or maybe a sister of her own. It's actually surprisingly endearing to me, and it frustrates me even more that Kai is so adamant that they leave. Why must you come between people, Kai? At the seashore, a handful of swimmers and their submersibles wave goodbye to Ethan as they dive beneath the water. He thanks them for their help, aware that without their aid, none of this would have been possible. From behind him, King Dane, Ethan's father, interjects. Founding a kingdom is easy, he says. Keeping it will be the hard part. He invites Ethan to sit one more time before the herons depart. Dane tells Ethan that he's proud of him. He's accomplished a great deal, and he's found a cause that he's committed to. That's admirable. Giving the lesser races a nation is going to drastically change things for the Raven nations and the herons. Given Ethan's closeness to Skink, Dane supposes that it should really be no surprise. Skink is perhaps as much a parent to Ethan as either of his biological ones. Whatever members of the lesser races accept Ethan's offer from the Heron lands, well, they'll find a way to come to terms with it. As will Ethan. If there's one thing that Dane can tell Ethan, it's that leadership is far more of a burden than it is a blessing. Ethan is the savior of the lesser races right now, sure, but he isn't one of them. How are they going to view him in a month? In a year? Will he be a reminder of their former masters? Or will they come to accept him? Ethan tells his father that he knew this wasn't going to be easy. And Dane agrees, it's not going to be. The Tournament Isle was never made to house people permanently, after all. How are they going to feed everyone? Clothe them? How will finding shelter work? These are things that Dane has never had to face, and he does not envy Ethan his task. However, Dane knows his son, and he knows that Ethan will find a way to make this work, if he really wants to. He helps his son stand, and then they hug. As they do, Dane tells Ethan that he loves him. He loves him more than life itself. And he loves him enough to let him go. Ethan thanks him and returns his love. As they separate, Dane asks about Ashley. Is she really that important to you? Ethan nods. More than even he knows. He can't believe that she and Braun share a parent. He's actually still worried about Braun, Ethan confesses. He isn't even sure if he's actually dead, or if he managed to avenge his brother, Artor. Well, Dane says, Ethan's mother, Mariella, is more worried about him than his vow. She's anxious to see him again, as soon as Ethan is free to visit. Ethan promises to, and asks Dane about Kai and Elena. He's worried that after everything they've been through, things are gonna be awkward. Cut to the docks, where Elena hugs her brother goodbye. This is not where she expected his life to go, but he's always made his own path. She tells him to remember where his true home is, and to visit. Ethan says that he will, and then he turns to Kai. He tells him that he doesn't want things to end like they did last time, back in issue 19. Kai might not understand his decisions, but he needs to know that Ethan isn't... Kai cuts him off. Oh, he understands. Ethan has made his choice. Ethan's older brother turns away from him and heads towards the boat. Elena charges after Kai, but Dane rests a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Give Kai some time. He'll come around, he tells Ethan. Whatever Kai's feelings, he assures Ethan that he is part of this family. Ethan knows that, but right now, he feels more like he's apart from his family. Having said their goodbyes, the Heron royal family boards their boat. Ethan watches it leave, and that's where we find him later on as Skink approaches. His old friend asks if he's okay. Ethan sighs. It feels like something just ended. Something that he'll never get back. Skink nods. Sometimes things must end for something new to begin. He tells Ethan that he's past a marker on his journey. There will be others. Ethan wishes he knew where this journey was taking him. He still doesn't know anything about this sigil on his arm. Maybe you haven't found those answers because you aren't supposed to know, Skink suggests. Instead of wondering where the sigil came from, maybe Ethan should focus on what he can do with it instead. Ethan gives Skink a suspicious side eye. It sounds like you know more than you're willing to say. In fact, you always seem to know more than you're saying. Skink smiles confidently. He's just trying to be a good guide for Ethan, ever since he was a child. Hopefully, if Skink has done his job well, a day will come when Ethan doesn't need him at all. Sometimes I feel like I know you completely, Ethan says. And sometimes it's like I barely know you at all. Ah, that's crazy talk, Skink says. You know me better than that. By the way, there is something that needs Ethan's attention. The refugees that they've taken in are looking for some direction, and they're expecting Ethan to provide it. Okay, Ethan knew that this was coming, sooner or later. Have them meet him in the arena. I love Dane's conversation with Ethan. Absolutely love it. Ethan has spent the past, 6 issues worried about what his family would think of his recent string of decisions. In his "I might be dead, sorry fam" letter, he even tells his parents that he expects them to be disappointed in him. So having Dane outright tell him that he is proud of his accomplishments, and that he wants him to be happy, and that he loves him, is just great. You see, Ethan, I told you that they'd understand. I also like Dane not freaking out over the potential lack of lesser races in his country. It's easy to look at the slavery of the lesser races in the Ravenlands in general and be like, yeah, floop those guys, free those people. But most of our experiences in the West have been positive ones. The Herons have undoubtedly felt like the good guys in this comic book, and that's with the capital G's. Freeing their lesser races is undoubtedly going to create some measure of social chaos. And you would think that Dane, as the king of that country, and the father of the guy responsible for it, would balk at that. But nope, he's barely worried about it. They'll figure something out. And that's kind of cool to see. I'm really amazed at Dane admitting that Skink is possibly as much a parent to Ethan as he and Mariella are. That is an interesting background detail, and wow. The Heron family is really well adjusted for having the kids be raised by a third party. The parents feel like they love their kids genuinely. The kids seem to love and respect their parents. Skink, you knocked this out of the park. And Dane isn't bitter or angry about it. That's just how it is. He's so mature and cool with it in this scene. So clearly, I really enjoy this. This is some interesting character work for Dane in a way that we haven't seen in this book so far. Obviously, Dane has been kind of a background character for most of the run, but getting to see these new elements of him are fascinating. The calm, open, emotionally vibes of this scene with Dane keep on rolling when Skink shows up. The first half of that conversation is really what I expect out of Ron Mars. Ethan is feeling lost, and Skink reassures him that no, he's actually doing fine for everything that he's going through. Ethan then complains about the sigil, but this time Skink doesn't brush it off. Well, I guess he does brush it off, but he brushes it off much more directly than he normally does. He outright tells Ethan that looking for answers about it is pointless. Focus on what you can do with it instead. Basically, stop asking this question, the audience is sick of it. And so am I. So quit it. Focus on your life and everything will be fine. And for the first time in Scion's history, Ethan actually notices that Skink is more than what he appears to be. He doesn't glom on to any new information here, and Skink has successfully dodged the issue once again, but it is refreshing to see Ethan finally catch on, even if it's just a little bit. There are some unfortunate panels here, where Ethan's eyebrows keep changing their shape. Like I said, Lee Moder isn't very comfortable with the cast at this point, and it really shows. The general work isn't bad, and there's actually one panel of Skink in particular that I think is incredibly well rendered, but Ethan's face is just slightly different from panel to panel, and it's definitely a little off-putting. At the arena, a crowd of lesser races refugees have gathered, leaving a pile of rock debris in the center. I'm not sure where this stonework came from, because Ethan and Braun did not damage any kind of support structure or mess up the grounds of the tournament arena, but maybe the cast doesn't know where this came from either, and that's why they're giving it a wide berth. In the shadows of the seats surrounding the arena, we see a cloaked, shadowed figure, and they're armed with a crossbow. In one of the waiting areas, Ethan and his crew wait in the shadows. Ethan tells Ashley that he really isn't comfortable doing this. They're all expecting him to have answers, and he doesn't have any. Maybe Ashley should talk to them. She has more of a history with the Underground, after all. They know her, vaguely. But Ashley shakes her head. Ethan was the one who pitched the tournament aisle. He was the one who stopped the fleets. He is the one who has proven to be their savior. And they know that he is the one that they want to hear from. Quietly accepting this, Ethan nods. He knows. Exeter tells them both that the audience is getting restless. They had better do this soon. Our couple looks at each other one more time and then link hands. This is what they wanted, yes? Ethan asks. Ashley smiles. Right. This is what they wanted. The crowd smiles and welcomes Ethan, allowing him to climb on top of the rubble. Ethan greets them, thanks them for their patience, and basically says that the fears and concerns that they have are the same ones that he faces. He might come from a vastly different background as a Heron Prince, but here in this place, he is a refugee like they are. Only by working together are they going to be able to find answers and make a sustainable future. This goes on for quite some time, and the speech is actually going pretty well. Except for the targeting reticle that is aimed at Ethan. The assassin loads an arrow into the crossbow. They aim again, and when they fire, their arrow is coated in golden energy. It streaks through the air and sinks into Ethan's right shoulder. Ashley cries out and starts to move towards him. A second arrow sinks into his waist. Exeter spots the shooter and points him out. A muscular member of the lesser races jumps from the seating, casting aside his cloak. His face is vaguely like that of a ram's, with curling horns on the side of his head. A shining dagger sings through the air as he lands, shouting that they don't want them here. He charges Ethan's position. Ashley draws her sword, recognizing this guy. He fought with her when they took the island. Why would he do this? The assassin bats her aside, saying that he'll deal with her later. The prince needs to die first. He kneels down, pulling Ethan closer by grabbing his shirt. Does it feel good? He asks. The human father looking down on his lesser children. They just threw off the chains of their masters. No way are they going to accept a human master again. No human will ever set foot on this soil again. Ethan groans. He's so blind. And then he blasts this guy with energy, driving him back. He apologizes, and then he checks on Ashley. She's okay, but how is Ethan? It hurts, he says, but he's had worse, right? Thanks to their positioning, Ashley can see behind Ethan, and he cannot let that happen. Ethan turns around. Exeter has grabbed the assassin and his knife and is poised to slice his neck. Ethan dives forward, grabbing Exeter's arm, which is like a child grabbing a parent's arm. This isn't going to be their way, he says. Exeter sneers at him. This guy tried to kill you. Quote, idealism is a pleasant concept, but you must be pragmatic, end quote. But Ethan won't have it. Take this dude, put him on a boat, exile the floop out of him, that's fine. but he will not see this nation founded on an execution. Do you understand me?" Exeter nods. "Better than you know." The assassin struggles in Exeter's arms. "You coward! You don't even have the nerve to kill me! I spit on your mercy! Puh!" Exeter wraps his arms around him even more tightly and lifts him up. "Enough!" He'll send him on his way. Ethan pulls out the arrows that are stuck in him as Exeter leaves. Good. Then he'll do what he has to. He climbs back onto the rock and addresses the crowd again. "Well, you heard him. You're all here because you don't want to serve a human. You wanted freedom. Ethan realizes that, but do they? Do they think of him as something else? As an outsider? As something separate from them? Because that's the old way of thinking. Here, none of them are royal-born or slave-born. They aren't human or lesser races. They're people. They're free people. And they're in this together. That is the only answer, honestly, that Ethan has for them. Everything else they can figure out as they go. For example, do they really want him to lead them? Or do they want him to leave? Whatever they choose, he will abide by. There's a large pause. No one seems to look around or debate. An arm suddenly shoots into the air. "Ethan!" The crowd picks up on it, and soon the entire arena is chanting his name. I'm not sure on my interpretation here, but I think that this scene is a callback to Ethan's dream in issue 1. Remember when Ethan dreamed of victory in the arena, the crowd chanting his name, but then it started raining and Ethan woke up to his brothers dumping a bucket of water on him? Yeah, that dream. Given the prevalence of artistic and story echoes in the back half of year 2, and how we've basically closed out this kind of opening era of Scion, it makes a lot of sense to me that Ron Marz would close this book out just like it opened. Where before Ethan's dreams were of hollow, meaningless glory, now his dream has been to actually help people, to give the lesser races a new home. And would you look at that? This one came true. It's almost like Marz is saying that we, as people, should focus less on achieving personal goals for our own selves and focus more on helping one another. It is a better, more righteous goal, although, yes, it is one fraught with hardship. It's worth it, though, exemplified through Ethan's success here. Although I appreciate Marz introducing this assassin and the ideas that he represents, because honestly, I think that he does make some very valid and very real points where if somebody other than Ethan was trying to take this role, this could go horribly wrong. But despite all of that, I hate that this assassin's story elements are ended so quickly. None of the lesser races seem willing to step up and govern themselves. No one here seems to have any kind of plan other than not be slaves, and they're all waiting for some kind of direction from Ethan, the top human in the room. To some degree, I think that this is understandable. If the majority of these folks have known nothing but lives of servitude and slavery, then I could see them having trouble finding a future on their own. Why should they know how to govern a nation or manage their own resources? They've never had to do that before. But we've met characters like Flitch back at the Sanctuary who very much felt like his own person. Maybe he wasn't in charge of the underground, but he knew the best ways to safeguard the Sanctuary. He knew how to gauge trusting people and who to not trust, as we saw with his interactions with Ethan, and he volunteered some of the Sanctuary supplies to Ethan before he left, supplies which would have been in short order anyways. He was clearly in some kind of leadership role, or he was at the very least comfortable with responsibility. Where is that kind of person now? Or, given that issue 26 spent its whole length building up the new character Elijah in our hearts and minds, why not introduce him as someone who was willing to lead? And not because he has experience in the field of leadership, but because he has faced hardships and he overcame them. It really just frustrates me that the lesser races have been given a chance to start their own society, however they want it to be, and the best idea we get is them asking Ethan to do it for them. I do appreciate Ethan's honesty with them, though. He's never done this before, and he's figuring it all out as he goes, the same as them. While Ethan is a member of the Heron royal family, he is also the youngest child, and as such, he hasn't had much leadership experience. He's definitely stepped up admirably during his adventures, and I'm sure that he's going to figure this out, but it is nice to be reminded that it's all kind of new to him. Him asking if the people want him as a leader is great as well. Him sparing the assassin is nice. Even Exeter wanting to kill him is actually a really nice touch. We've seen Exeter kind of remind Ethan that he has been a merciless killer before, back when they were first taking the island. Exeter would probably say that he's pragmatic, solving problems before they get worse, but I would totally agree with Ethan on this particular problem. Like, imagine being a slave your entire life, trapped in one location, bought and sold as the property of another person, and then you hear about these two humans who are fighting to give you freedom. Sounds unbelievable, but you know what? You're desperate. You'll take it. You flee your master, struggling just to get to the distant island, and you finally make it. Man, was that tough. And then our first big meeting in this free land ends with one of the humans having a dissident killed right in front of you. If you piss this guy off, he's gonna have you killed. That's what that signals. How would you be any better off here on this island, you would wonder? But instead, by sparing the assassin, Ethan isn't just demonstrating mercy and compassion, he is also showing the lesser races that they can trust him. So overall, this was a nice changing pace issue. We've had a lot of character work to get through in regards to Ethan and his family, which was all pretty solid, and we're starting to examine what life is going to be like in this nascent nation. We've still got a ways to go, but I do think that this is a solid start from a storytelling perspective, even if it is unevenly drawn. Before we move on to issue 28, we have one final page. That night, Exeter stands on the rocky shores of the Isle, a crescent moon in the sky behind him. We can hear the crashing of waves on the rocks, feel the salty sea air as it blows into our faces. Exeter's thin eyes stare out over the water. Lying out in that water, his own dagger buried in his chest, is the assassin. Prince Court of the Ravens opens issue 28. He's being dressed in very regal, if complicated and far too ornamental, clothing. His chamberlain talks about how the Raven Nation needs his coronation. They've lost 2 kings within the last year, the princess turned out to be a murdering traitor, and they didn't even get to win a war. Come on! They need something like this ceremony, and all the pomp that comes with it, to lift their spirits. Court, in general, looks pretty uncomfortable, but perhaps the Chamberlain is right. He'll wear the clothes. And we cut to not much later as he kneels before, what looks like some sort of trio of religious figures, I guess, who place a crown on Court's head, coronating him the new king of the Raven Nation. Longtime listeners will remember that Bronn once told Mai Shen that Court dreaded the idea of taking the throne. And I do feel like we see some of that reluctance here. King Victor would have seen the political use in this kind of ceremony, and what it would mean to the people of the country. Bronn would have reveled in its excess and attention on him, and seen this as a way of celebrating how floopin' awesome he is. But Court is just uncomfortable with all of it. The Chamberlain talks him into the costume, which indicates to me that Court might not be thinking for himself a lot. He didn't want to take the throne to begin with, and now that he has it, I think we might see some behind-the-throne puppeteering going on. The Ravenlands are going to continue to be interesting, even without Ethan or Bronn in them. As we move on, author Ron Marz, artist Jim Fern, inker Don Hillsman II, and colorist Jason Keith give us a nice montage-style spread over 2 pages. The image features our entire cast and a series of narration boxes that recap the broad strokes of Scion so far. But interestingly, the narration boxes themselves appear to be computer documents. Like, it's as if someone is typing up an email. They end this scene by reporting that Ethan and Ashley now have to govern their new island, and it is in that their true challenge lies. We then cut to a pair of lesser races men fighting, each one having claimed a house for their own. Our power couple steps in, separating the men and asking them to explain. The first, whose skin is a dark gray, claimed this house first. King Ethan said that they were free to claim whatever house they wanted, and so he did. Ethan quietly says, "It's just Ethan. Please, no, cut with the king stuff." The second man, who is orange-skinned with a strong underbite, says basically the same thing. "He claimed this house first. Plus, he has a wife and child, so they need a larger house." And that's what I sound like with an underbite, so I apologize. The gray man shakes loose of Ethan and dives at his rival. "Who cares if you have a family? Someday, so will he." Orange man laughs, and he says that he won't be alive long enough to father one. Before they can start fighting again, Ethan lights his hand up and shouts for them to stop. The two men pause, looking fearfully at Ethan, like yelled at children. "Do you really have a family?" Ethan asks the orange one. In a hushed tone, he says that he does. Ethan then declares that the house should go to the orange-skinned one. He apologizes to the gray-skinned guy, but the other one's need outweighs his claim. They came here to build a better life, he adds, and if that's so, then they need to value that. They need to work together in order to solve problems like this. Now, no more of this petty bickering, you understand? The two men quietly agree, chastised. Ethan and Ashley leave the scene, but Ashley can see that Ethan is bothered by what just happened. You see, this kind of scene is exactly the bit of storytelling that bothers me about what we have going on here. These two lesser races dudes are acting honestly how I would expect people to act. That is not surprising, and it's not terribly interesting. But Ethan solves this problem by just declaring an outcome and forcing them both to go along with it. He doesn't find an equitable solution or propose something clever here. He just picks a side because he wants to be done with this particular problem. And this is how you're going to solve disputes? Just walk around the island and stubble into them? Make some kind of plan for housing them all and assigning ownership rights, or hire somebody to do that. Or if these two dudes want to argue over who gets the house so badly, put them in charge of the process. But tell them that they can't choose their own house until everyone else has been assigned one. That way, they can learn to work together, keep each other honest, and hopefully learn to respect the needs of others. Given that Ethan's whole journey has been him stumbling in the dark, but succeeding thanks to the power of the sigil, it is refreshing to see him challenged in a new way, intellectually as opposed to physically. You can't just beat everyone who poses a problem, you know. It is a nice, if frustrating, character trait. I want Ethan to be better than this, and that's why this particular solution and this scene bothers me. So Ashley tries to reassure Ethan that things will be all right. That was just one argument. He can't let it get to him. But Ethan has. How is this supposed to work, he asks. None of us know what we're doing. The people don't know how to live their own lives, and Ethan doesn't know how to guide them through this. But they'll learn, Ashley replies. They've been here for what, a month? These dudes have been here for a month and they didn't have a home? Wow. Give them some time, Ashley says. She takes his hands and pulls him along. Come with me, she says. I have something to show you. We find them sitting on a large hill underneath a tree. The setting sun paints the sky a lovely cascade of reds, oranges, and yellows, which is then reflected on the sea. Ashley asks Ethan if he can see it. And he's like, yeah, the sunset is beautiful, but what's your point? Ashley explains that, when she was a little girl, her father would have her brought to the throne room, and they would sit together. They would watch the sunset, enjoying the quiet. King Victor told her that each day brings its challenges and its rewards, but you can't do more in one day than you were able to do. So be satisfied with what you did, and grateful that tomorrow you get to do a bit more. Be patient, Ethan, she says. Everything comes in time. Ethan stares at her. He needed to be reminded of that. He leans in for a kiss, but as his eyes shift, he sees something in the sky behind Ashley. A cloud of small, bat-winged beasts have gathered, and they all approach the couple. Ashley identifies them as widdershins, and, yeah, alright, sure. Ethan summons his sword, Ashley pulls a dagger from her boot, and they go back to back, defending themselves. As all of this has gone on, our narrator has picked up their discourse. They recognize that Ethan and Ashley complement one each other as a couple, but also that they've barely gotten to know one another. Since they have paired up, they have bounced from one threat to another with barely any chance to breathe. That's called trauma bonding, mysterious narrator. They continue, describing the sigil when Ethan summons his sword. He is powerful, and he uses the power that he has with increasing ease. Unbeknownst to him, this person has occasionally placed dangers in his way in order to test him. And I'm sorry, what? Ethan and Ashley fight well, but there are too many Widdershins and they are attacking them from every angle. They are beginning to get overwhelmed, when a strange, shrill vibration fills the air. Our heroes drop to the ground in pain, as do the Widdershins. These two make a formidable pair, the narrator notes. And best of all, they're idealistic. Getting them to see the way should be easy, especially if it is presented by someone that they view as a trusted ally. The vibration stops, and as our heroes look up, Nadia Thindi now stands in their midst. She asks if they're okay, and yeah, they're fine. But does she know what that sound was? Nadia does. They have these Widdershin things in Tigris as well, although they call them a different name. She has a high-frequency emitter built into her mechanical arm that discourages them, among other things. They are easily startled beasts, she notes. Almost anything could have set them off. It's a good thing she happened to come by, Ethan says. Yeah, Ashley says. Great timing there, Nadia. What are you doing here? Nadia says that she was just trying to find someplace to be alone. She's always hesitant to disturb the two of them, since they get so little of it. Ethan and Ashley both complain that they don't get much private time, and suddenly Ethan looks at Ashley. You know what? Since he has to learn patience anyways, and they need some private time, maybe they can leave the care of the island to Exeter and Nadia for a few days, and go visit his family in the Heron Lands. And while Jim Fern is just as new to drawing these two as Lee Moder was, he perfectly captures Ashley's expression. It's this wonderful mix of, yeah, vacation is a good idea, and, but you want me to visit your family? Like, this might sound great to Ethan. He's going home where he has people who like and treasure him. But for her, the Herons have been her enemies, if only conceptually, all of her life. Kai has been nothing but rude and disrespectful to her, and even Dane was bothered by her in issue 25. What makes him think that she wants to spend a vacation there? To be fair, visiting the in-laws is part of the gig when you have a partner. Imagine how awesome a visit to the Ravenlands is going to be when Ethan has to go. On that note, why has Court not cleared up the idea that Ashley is a murderer? He teased Braun that he knew that he had done it, so where's the national investigation into Victor's death? I can understand why Court wouldn't like Braun and why you would let something like a murder charge hang over him, but does he really dislike Ashley so much? She's the only family that you have left, dude. Pardon her. Man, hashtag justice for Ashley. The narrator says that they had hoped that the two kingdoms would destroy each other. Unfortunately, they have stopped short of that. But this trip has revealed some powerful allies that can help further the cause. Soon, this world will be theirs. And Nadia finishes typing up her email on a small personal laptop-esque device and hits send. This reveal is inherently interesting, as it finally shows some sort of personal agency to Nadia's character. Up to now, Nadia has been content to just pal around with Ethan's crew, and now we finally have a reason why. She has been doing information gathering for Tigris, although what their aims are is still kind of unknown. Clearly they want to take over the world, but what does taking over the world mean for Tigris? I want to keep portraying this reveal as a betrayal or some kind of insidious twist, but Nadia still really hasn't done anything bad yet. Manipulative, maybe, like the scene with the Widdershins would seem to indicate. Nadia is testing Ethan and Ashley and sees them as potential allies of Tigris. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. We don't know enough about her motivations yet to make that kind of call. This reveal does add some context to her previous behavior, though. Nadia's questions to Skink or Ethan are now gathering intelligence. She never said much about her background because she is a spy, and she doesn't want to share any information that she doesn't have to. But by finally taking the tournament aisle for the Underground, Ethan has proven that he is a powerful force, able to change the landscape of the Heron and Raven lands and power balance. He would now make a great ally, where before he was just a curiosity. This is when Nadia tells him of Tigress. Her willingness to ally with the Underground has earned her Ethan's trust, a trust that she might now be able to manipulate to Tigress's advantage. However, Mars has Nadia state that she has led threats to our cast in order to test them, but the only instance of this is the scene with the Wittershins. Since meeting Nadia, Ethan and Ashley have traveled to Haven, taken the tournament aisle, and then beaten Braun, none of which was manipulated by Nadia at all. The closest we come is the fight with the Wyvern when we first met Nadia, but this scene would indicate that Nadia didn't come to these lands in order to make contact with Ethan. She went to the Ravenlands hoping to find that the two nations had destroyed each other in Tigress's meantime. Only upon learning that they hadn't, and accidentally meeting Ethan and company, did she switch her focus to learning more about him. Despite Nadia claiming to be this mastermind, she really isn't. And I think that is a real missed opportunity for interesting stories. After all, Nadia is clearly proficient with technology. Maybe she could have sabotaged the sub to Haven and then created some drama there. Maybe she could have encouraged the sparing of the Raven garrison on the tournament aisle, knowing that the Raven fleet was on their way. Or maybe she could have encouraged the assassin into attacking Ethan in the first place. Like, if the idea was to make us distrust Nadia, Mars could have been seeding that since her very first appearance. I certainly didn't trust her anyways, so getting a late-game reveal that my mistrust was earned would feel great, and I would feel pretty vindicated. As it is now, this just feels like it comes out of left field. Having opened in the Ravenlands, we now bounce to the west, to the lovely nighttime gardens behind the Heron Palace. King Dane and Queen Mariella are enjoying a nice stroll. I like to imagine that it's a cool night, crisp and refreshing. The pair spend the scene discussing their children. Mariella has long known that Ethan was different from the other kids, but even she didn't suspect what his life has become. She's proud of him, though, and Dane repeats that he is too. Probably more proud than he would have been if Ethan had stayed in the West, actually. He then switches the topic to Mariella's son, Kai, and she smiles ruefully at him. Funny how Kai becomes her child when he's being difficult. They're both concerned at the distance between him and Ethan, but Mariella thinks that Kai's problem isn't really with Ethan. She suspects that Kai is still grieving for Artor and for his own future, since he is now the one in line to inherit the throne, a role that he never relished. Dane asks if they should do anything about Kai and Ethan, and she says no. Pushing Kai is only going to bother him more, and as far as he and Ethan are concerned, they are both grown men. They are going to need to solve whatever problems lie between them themselves. Dane smiles and sighs. She's right. She always is. Mariella agrees and heads in for the night, kissing Dane on the cheek. Is he coming? He wants to enjoy the night a bit more. The snows will come soon, he says, and these kinds of nights are rare. Mariella tells him not to be long and then heads inside. Dane continues to walk through the gardens, lost in thought. Herons walk about the area freely. A fine breeze pulls at his cape, and he suddenly stops. Hello? He asks the knight. Is someone there? Dane walks to the nearest hedge and pulls at its branches, making an opening. He steps through, and now the garden is empty. Ooh, a mystery! What a nice change of pace! So, these two issues feature 2 out of the 3 things that I remember about the rest of Scion. 1, the assassination attempt on Ethan, and 2, Nadia's reveal. The third thing, well, we'll get there, so bear with me, but we will get there. I like the ending scene with Dane and Mariella in general. It's nice to get their own readings on their kids, and Mariella provides some interesting insight into Kai's mind. We haven't got to see a lot of Mariella in the book, so having her feel like this calm, wise matriarch is a nice compliment to the far more impulsive and trusting Dane. He wants to make things right between his kids, and that is a great instinct, but a parent can only do so much. What was calling to him in the bush and where that goes, I do not recall at all. I feel like I vaguely remember how this story element ends, but I don't remember any of the details of it. And I'm actually kind of pumped because of that, because it means I get to re-explore this back half of Scion. This is practically uncharted territory for me, other than like a landmark or two, so this is particularly exciting for me. I forgot that this moment happened. Next time, Ethan and Ashley do visit the Heron royal family, which is fraught with dangers all its own. And their trip reveals another danger, that without Ethan, the Sanctuary Isle is an easy target for pirates. Join me in a week for Comic Book Breakdown episode 18.17 of Scion, Dangers Unseen. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.